Okay, so in the last video we manually set up the finest level and the middle level of control for our first finger. We now can go ahead and write a script that will automate this process for a finger, so we can apply it to our second, third and fourth fingers and automate the entire process, because it's a repetitive process, it's a very methodical process, so there's no point doing it manually on all of the rest of our fingers. So I'm going to create a brand new tool, so I'm going to right click on our shelf and create a new tool. And I'm going to give this the tool name of finger controls, and let's just give this the label of finger. I'll give it an icon of obj underscore null, so that we have that null icon, since we're dealing with setting up control objects which are all built using nulls. And we can jump over to the script tab. Notice our language is set to Python. I'll maximize our editor, and all of the functions that we're going to be calling on, a lot of them are going to come from the external file that we installed earlier, that character rigging 1 file. We're going to be calling on getting user input to specify a start bone and an end bone. That's something that we developed back in the technical rigging series. We're going to be building an FK control chain, again something that we built back in the technical rigging series. It's going to act very similar to if we were to click on that tool on our shelf for creating FK controls, where we ask for a start bone and an end bone, then we set up FK controls on that. But from there, because we're calling the functionality ourselves, we can keep working with those controls. We can go ahead and modify the controls so that we lock certain parameters, set orientation, etc. Then we can duplicate our first control. We can parent our FK control, the original first FK control, to our new control. We can parent our start bone to our new control. And then we can go in and modify our bones rotate X expression. So we want to make sure that we import character rigging 1, that is the module that we installed right at the beginning of this DVD. And then I'm going to define a new function, and let's just define this as FK finger underscore tool. And then I'm going to block in some comments. So we're going to ask the user for start and end bones in a bone chain. We want to ensure that that user input didn't error. I want to create FK controls for those bones. Then I want to modify all but the first FK control. So we're going to lock their rotate Y, rotate Z and set their orientations. I want to duplicate the first FK control. I want to parent the first FK control to the new control. I want to parent our start bone to the new control. I want to then go ahead and modify the rotate X expression for all bones except for our start bone. So after we've done that, I do want to go ahead and actually invoke our tools. So FK finger underscore tool. Notice the indentation. I am back outside of that function. I'm invoking the tool. Let's go ahead and simply begin by printing out something like FK finger underscore tool, just to denote that we are indeed inside that tool. So if we accept and run our finger tool, you'll see that it does print out FK finger underscore tool. So if we clear that and print that again, you can see that's all we're getting printed out. The other message in there was from earlier on, so we can clear that, and I will move that just off to the side. So I'm going to bring back up the script for our tool, and the first thing we can do is ask the user for a start and end bones in a bone chain. So we're going to say bones, and that's equal to character rigging 1, since it's inside that character rigging 1 module, dot techrig underscore user input underscore start bone end bone. This is a function that we wrote back in the technical rigging series to ask the user to specify a start bone and push enter, to specify an end bone and push enter. It will return those bones as a tuple to us, with the start bone being in the first index and the second bone, the end bone being in that second index, and we can verify that by printing out bones. If we print out bones, we'll see a tuple that gets printed with our start bone and end bone specified. So if we accept that, let's go ahead and run our tool, select a start bone. I'm going to select L underscore finger 2 underscore bone 1, enter, select an end bone, grab bone 3, enter. We can see there it's printed out the tuple of those bones, the first being obj / finger 2 bone 1, the other being finger 2 bone 3. It's worth noting that function does check to make sure that these bones exist within a hierarchy, such that we make sure that if we were selecting a start bone, say on this finger, and an end bone on this finger, they're not in the same bone chain, the tool would throw up an error message to the user if that was the case. So let's go ahead and move that off to the side and continue working on our tool. So we can see that that is working. Now if the user input errored in any way, it's going to return to us a tuple with none in for the first and second index. If it did error, we want to make sure that we don't continue trying to work with the results of that user input. So we're going to say if bones was equal to a tuple with none in, then simply go ahead and return. Jump out of this function, do not continue working on this function. Otherwise, we can create FK controls for our bones. So we can say FK controls is equal to, let's call on another function in the character rigging 1 module, and we're going to call on techrig underscore build FK control chain. That takes in a start bone and an end bone. The start bone is in index 0 of bones, the end bone is in index 1 of bones. So that's going to actually build our FK controls on our bone chain. If we accept this, we can go ahead and build FK controls on the bone chain. I do want to save my scene so that I can reopen my scene after I apply that, because just undoing doesn't necessarily undo all of the work involved by that tool. So I do want to be able to just simply reload my existing file to undo that tool, if you will. But we can apply our tool, select start bone, let's grab finger 2 bone 1, enter, select end bone, let's grab finger 2 bone 3, enter. We're now going to get those FK controls applied, so we can grab those, rotate those, and they are going to be affecting our bones. So that's fantastic. I'm going to open up that old file, discard and open. Fantastic. And then bring back up our tool. So we have our FK controls, and we want to modify all but the first FK control. To do that, we need to go in and work out what is our first FK control. Now, all of the FK controls are returned to us, and they're actually created in reverse order from the end bone to the start bone. That means our FK control for the start bone will have been the last FK control that was created. That means it will be put in that FK controls tuple. It will be the last entry into that tuple, or the last entry into that list. That means that we need to find the last entry in that list to find our first control. So first control is equal to FK controls length, so the length of FK controls minus 1. So that will find the last entry into that list and return that to us as our first control. And obviously our first control, now that we have it, we can check all the other controls and say, are you equal to the first control? If you are, then we don't want to modify you. If you're not, then obviously we do want to modify you. Also, having our first control here will allow us to duplicate that first control in a second. So now that we have that first control, I'm going to say for control in FK controls. So that will loop through all of the controls that got returned to us, and I want to go ahead and say if control is not equal to first control, then let's go ahead and lock its parameters, rotate Y, rotate Z, and also set the orientation parameter to be the YZ plane, which is a value of 1 on that parameter. It's the second option down on that parameter. So we're going to say control.palm ry.lock. Yes, we want to lock that parameter, so set that to a value of 1. Control.palm rz.lock. Yes, we want to lock that parameter to set it to a value of 1. Control.palm orientation, which was the orientation of that plane, and we want to set that to YZ, so we need to set that to a value of 1. Again, 1 is the second option in that menu, and that is the YZ plane in that menu. So it's going to loop through all of the controls except for our first, set up their rotations to be locked, and also set up their orientation. If we accept that, and now apply this again, so I am going to make sure we have the file saved. Let's just run that, grab our start bone, enter, let's zoom out, and grab our end bone, enter, and you'll see that I set it up, but these controls now can only be rotated. If we grab those, there we go, they can only be rotated on X, and you can see that orientation has updated to indicate that the first control is completely unaffected, can be rotated on all 3 axes, and its orientation hasn't been set to have a specific plane. So now we can open back up that old file, There we go. And continue editing our tool. So the next step would be to duplicate our first FK control. So I need to create a new node, and to create a new node we need to know what node is this node going to be created inside, and at the moment we need to be created inside OBJ, but we don't necessarily know that. What we want to do is we want to go ahead and find out where is our FK control currently and find out who is his parent node. Then we can go ahead and create a node within that parent node. So I'm going to say that parent object is equal to first control dot parent. Now instead of manually creating a node and having to set all its parameters and everything so it is a duplicate, it's going to be a lot easier for us to basically call on a function that allows us to copy nodes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say that our new node, which is equal to finger control, is equal to who dot copy nodes to. What nodes do we want to copy? We have to pass in a tuple of nodes that we want to copy, so they need to go in parentheses, and we want to copy our first control, and we want that control to be copied, and we need to specify again as a tuple. That means we need a comma after it. But where do we want it to be copied into? We want it to be copied into our parent object. Now, who.copyNodes2 is actually going to return a tuple of controls. We know we're only, a tuple of nodes. We know we're only after one node, and we know that there's only going to be one node in there. So I want to grab index 0 of that tuple and save that into my finger control. So now if we were to accept this and were to apply our finger tool, we can grab our start bone, enter, end bone, enter. See that that all got created, but also see that we now have a duplicate of that FK control and everything is the same there. It's a perfect duplicate. So let's go ahead and open up that old file. Fantastic, and continue editing our tool. So now that we have that duplicate control, we want to parent our first FK control to the new control object. So we want to say that our first control, we want to set its first input so that we parent it. And we know that we already have the keep position when parented parameter checked, so we don't have to worry about setting that. And we want to parent to that newly created finger control. Now, inaccuracies may cause slight rotations on our rotation parameters. We want to go ahead, just as when we set it up manually, and zero those out. So we're going to say first control dot parameter rx dot set to a value of 0. We want to go ahead and say first control dot palm ry, and we want to set that to a value of 0. And we want to say first control dot palm rz and set that to a value of 0. So now we're going to have the first FK control parented under the new control. We also want to parent the start bone to the new control, and for that we do need to make sure that we tell it to keep its position when parenting. So I'm going to say bones 0, that is our start bone, dot palm keep position, so keep pos, dot set to a value of 1. That's going to make it keep position when parenting. We can then say bones 0 dot set first input finger control. So that means we're going to parent ourselves to that finger control. So if we accept this and test this out now, let's grab our start bone, enter, grab our end bone, enter. That's all created. But now the parenting in place means that we can jump in, and if we grab our finger control, which is our main finger control, which we do need to rename, and we're going to be renaming that manually since we don't necessarily know what we want to name it. It's easy to name just 3 nodes manually, but that's going to affect the entire finger. Then our other FK control from there will also affect the finger. So that is working fantastically. We do need the bones to offset their rotate X to reference the rotate X based on that parameter. So that's going to be the next part of the script, the final part of the script that we tackle. So we need to modify the rotate X expression for all bones except for the start bone. So we need to loop through our bones. So I'm going to set the current bone equal to our end bone, equal to bones 1. And I'm going to say that we are not currently done. Done is equal to 0. And whilst we're not done, I want to loop through, and I want to see if we are the start bone, then we're done, and we don't need to modify our rotate X. So if current bone is start bone, we're done, and we don't need to modify our X. So if current bone is equal to bones 0, that means we are equal to the start bone. Done is equal to 1, and we don't want to do anything else. However, if we're not equal to that start bone, that means we do want to modify our rotate X, and we also then want to grab our parent so that we can continue looping through this loop up the bone chain until we hit the start bone and break out of the loop. So the first thing we can do is say that current bone is equal to current bone dot inputs, and we want index 0. We want the first input into our bone, the only input into our bone, and that means we're going to grab our parent, we're going to work our way up that chain. We also want to take the current rotate X expression and append our finger controls rotate X to it. So the new expression is going to be equal to the old expression, so it's going to be equal to current bone dot palm rotate X dot expression. That will give us the expression that's entered into that parameter, plus we want to add to that, so we're saying plus in terms of concatenating a string, but now in the string we want to add, because we want to have something plus something in that string. I want to add a channel, so I'm going to start the channel expression. I'm going to use double quotes in order to now specify a channel, then a single quote to end that, because I'm now going to call on some Python functionality to construct the next part of the string. I want a relative path to our finger control from our current bone, so I'm going to say current bone dot relative path to, and pass in our finger control. From there we know that we want to grab the rotate X of that control, so we're going to append rotate X, close off the channel expression, and close off that string. With that new expression in place, we can say current bone dot parameter rotate X dot set expression, and we can set that to the new expression. So that means that all of our bones expressions will be updated based on that rotate X. That's everything we need for that script, so I am going to delete out that print line. If we accept this, then go ahead and run our finger. Let's grab the start bone and enter. Let's grab the end bone and enter, and that has now automated the entire process. We can see that if we have the finger to bone 1 FK control, that is the entire finger FK control. If we rotate that, it's going to rotate the entire finger. If we roll that round, that is going to cause all our bones to rotate. From there we can jump in and start working with the FK controls individually. So that tool is now working. So let's go ahead, and we've got that applied for our second finger. There's a few little bits of cleanup we need to do that I'm happy to do manually rather than in the tool. The first is to set these to have a blue wireframe color. The next is to move these in the network editor to make a little bit more sense. So I'm basically pairing up FK controls so they're sat underneath the bones that they're actually affecting. And then we've got that overall finger control. I do want to go in and rename that so that that equals L underscore finger 2 underscore FK control. So that's our second finger setup. Let's go ahead and apply this now for our third and fourth fingers. So let's run our finger tool, grab finger 3, enter, and the end bone for finger 3, and enter. You can see now how quick this is going to be for us to get set up. Let's grab the FK controls for finger 3, blue wireframe color. Move these in the network editor so that controls for bone 3 underneath bone 3, for bone 2 underneath bone 2, for bone 1 underneath bone 1, then move the overall up to above between the root and the finger itself. Grab the overall control and rename that to, as we try and rename, there we go, L underscore 3 underscore bone 3. We remove out the bone, so L underscore 3, L underscore finger 3 underscore FK control, as I get tongue tied there trying to say the name and think a name at the same time. So let's go ahead and click on our tool once more, grab the first bone for finger 4, the second bone, or the last bone rather, for finger 4. Then go ahead, reposition these in the network, and then repositioning that last control, renaming that, removing out the underscore bone 1, remove out the 1 on the end, and giving all of these a blue wireframe color. So if we grab that blue wireframe color, Fantastic. So you can see how quickly that tool has helped us to set up the other fingers. After a little bit of development, we now have the fingers being set up very, very quickly. So with that, that is going to conclude this video where we've got those fingers set up. In the next video, we'll take a look at that highest level of control, that control that will rotate all of our fingers, and that control that will deal with spreading our fingers as well. But with that, that concludes this video. Thanks a lot, everyone.